there was a small child of 2 or 3 years old who was pulling at the arm of his mother, who was lying covered with blood on the ground. I heard the child shouting, "Get up, Mummy, get up."
On the pleasant summer morning of July 15th, 1992, a passerby came across a horrific sight in Wimbledon Common, southwest London. 23-year-old Rachel Nickell was lying soaked in blood underneath a silver birch tree. Clinging to her side, her 2-year-old son was desperately pleading for her to wake up. The incident sent shockwaves through the country, leaving the community in fear and law enforcement with the daunting task of finding the perpetrator responsible for this atrocious act. But as the investigation progressed, mind-boggling twists unfolded, taking everyone by surprise. With the investigation still underway, two compelling questions emerged. Who could harbor such deep-seated animosity towards this innocent woman? Would the child's eyewitness account provide crucial evidence to bring the culprit to justice? Or would the trauma impede his ability to recall crucial details? Welcome back to M7 Crime Storytime, where we cover solved, unsolved, and twisted cases from all over the world. Today we'll be looking at a case with the most insane twists you've ever heard. But first, if you still haven't subscribed to our channel, consider doing so and make sure to hit that like button. Let's dive right into the story, which still stands out as one of the most notorious crimes in British history, without any further ado. Today's case takes us to Wimbledon, London, a place that captures the heart with its timeless charm. Nestled in the southwest of the bustling city, this enchanting district is known worldwide for its prestigious tennis tournament, but it offers so much more. As you wander through Wimbledon, you'll find an irresistible blend of history and modernity. With an array of Victorian-style houses, the streets are also lined with charming boutiques, quaint cafes, and independent shops, each with its unique character. The soul of Wimbledon, however, can be found in its lush open spaces, where nature and urban life harmoniously coexist. It was a neighborhood that embraced tradition and offered respite from the fast-paced world, reminding people to appreciate the simple joys of life. However, this place also carries a haunting chapter in its history, forever linked with the tragic 1992 murder of Rachel Nickell, an event that left an indelible mark on this otherwise peaceful neighborhood. Rachel Jane Nickell was born on November 23, 1968, to her Army officer father Andrew Nickell and her mother Monica in Great Totham, a village near Colchester in Essex, England. She possessed a naturally charitable spirit from a young age, displaying a genuine desire to assist the elderly and disabled children in her community. While attending Colchester High School for Girls, Rachel excelled in her studies. But she also shared a passion for dancing, singing, and acting. So to hone her skills, at the young age of 11, she joined the Essex Dance Theatre. While she had the potential to pursue a career in the arts, she ultimately made the decision to study history and English and earned a degree. However, she still had aspirations to become a model someday. In 1988, Rachel secured a job as a lifeguard at a Richmond swimming pool, and it was there that she crossed paths with Andre Hanscombe, a young motorcycle courier. The two quickly fell in love, and the following year, Rachel gave birth to their son, Alexander Lewis. Although the couple wasn't married, they were living together as a family. Off to a fresh start, the couple moved to the Balham area of South London with their infant son. While Andre worked hard to provide for the family, Rachel stayed home. She devoted herself to being a full-time mother, even though she'd been offered work as a photographic model. By July 1992, Rachel's life seemed to be on a positive trajectory. She eagerly anticipated the approaching milestone of her son Alex's 3rd birthday, which was just a month away. She went about her days, oblivious to the harrowing fate that soon lay in store for her. On July 15, 1992, the residents of South London awoke to a warm and promising Wednesday morning. For Rachel Nickell, it was no different either. She decided to go for a walk with her son Alex and her dog Molly, which she did on a regular basis. Her go-to spot was Wimbledon Common, a vast 1,100-acre stretch of countryside which was used as a public park. The Common played host to a myriad of activities, including cricket, rugby, golf, horseback riding, jogging, and dog walking. No wonder, even on that particular day, it drew a crowd of more than 500 people. Although it was 3 miles away from her home, Rachel found this spot safer than the parks nearer her home. Rachel arrived at the Wimbledon Common Car Park at 9:45 a.m. that morning. After parking her car, she walked by the mound on a path frequented by her, unaware of the evil that was waiting just around the corner. At around 10:35 a.m., Michael Murray, a retired architect, was walking his dog along the same path when he made a chilling discovery.
We came up this path and I saw what I thought was someone sunbathing. I saw a bare leg. But as we got closer, I realized that this was something quite different and horribly tragic.
There, drenched in a pool of blood, lay the lifeless body of 23-year-old Rachel Nickel. Also soaked in his mother's blood, a hysterical Alex was begging his mother to wake up, clinging to her arms.
There was a small child, 2 or 3 years old, who was pulling at the arm of his mother, who was lying covered with blood on the ground. I heard the child shouting, "Get up, Mummy, get up."
Deeply shaken by the heartbreaking sight before him, Murray called the police. Upon receiving the distressing call, the police swiftly sprang into action and cordoned off the area. One of the first officers to reach the scene was Chief Inspector Mick Wickerson, and the scene was nothing less than traumatic for him either.
And I can honestly tell you that this is the most horrendous and vicious attack that I've ever seen.
From the outset, it was evident that the attack was frenzied. Rachel was stabbed to death with such a force that every single one of her vital organs had been damaged. She received a total of 49 stab wounds. Some of those wounds were to her back and chest areas, but a few wounds on her hands suggested that she'd valiantly fought for her life before being tragically overpowered by her assailant. The slash to her neck was so violent that it had almost decapitated her. Some injuries were inflicted after death as a tormenting proof that the attacks did not stop even at her death. Her pants were pulled down from the waist, which hinted at the horrid possibility of assault. Alex was examined at the scene as Rachel's body was sent to the medical examiner's office. He had abrasions on his face that were consistent with being dragged along the ground while face down. But amidst this harrowing tragedy, authorities were facing a formidable challenge to contain a crime scene of over 1,000 acres and with potentially 500 witnesses. The crowd was allowed to depart after the police took their statements. Sadly, no one had heard Rachel's screams or witnessed the crime. Officers were hoping that the killer would have left some DNA evidence behind, but unfortunately, forensics did not find any foreign DNA at the crime scene. However, minute flecks of red paint had been combed from Alex's hair, which was then preserved as evidence. When Rachel's boyfriend, Andre Hanscombe, received the devastating news of her untimely death, his world was shattered. Despite his own grief, his fatherly instinct kicked in, and he knew that he had to be strong for his child. The boy was, however, in much worse condition, having witnessed his mother's death in front of his own eyes. In 90s London, it was the rarest of the rare incidences of such an attack taking place in broad daylight, so the news quickly spread, dominating headlines across the city. The incident left the community in a state of profound disbelief and horror. In the midst of all this, Andre made a heartfelt plea to the public to come forward with any information they had regarding the killer.
I would say to anybody who does know this person, no matter how they feel about them, please come forward before he destroys anybody else's life.
Rachel's parents, Andrew and Monica, were vacationing in Canada when the tragic incident unfolded. It took 4 agonizing days for the heartbreaking truth to reach them. They knew they'd lost their daughter forever, and all they wanted was to know who was capable of committing such a cruel act.
She can never be replaced in our lives. We can only try and slowly pick up the pieces, but our lives will always be less rich than when she was alive.
The Metropolitan Police of London, on the other hand, were facing an appalling situation where they had neither any forensic evidence nor an eyewitness account. With this challenging scenario, the pressing question weighing on their minds was, where would they begin?
The appalling situation. We had no stranger's blood, we had no fibres, we had no hairs, we had no forensic evidence, we had no eyewitnesses. And the question that was uppermost in our minds is, where on earth do we start?
With no potential leads at hand, the team of detectives, led by Keith Petter working on Rachel's case, had to investigate an array of suspects. They interviewed Rachel's family members, friends, and even local offenders, but to no avail.
They all were looked at, despite some very, very intensive inquiries in respect of some of those other suspects. There was no evidence to put them either at the scene of the common or to link them with Rachel's death.
Now, investigators had only one hope: Alex, Rachel's 3-year-old son, and the sole eyewitness to the tragic murder. After the murder, Alex was taken to a child psychologist, Dr. Jean Harris Hendricks, who suggested that reliving his mother's death would be a harrowing experience for little Alex, and that the primary reason for the investigators to not approach him during the initial investigation. However, with no other viable options available, they found themselves compelled to reconsider the idea. With the presence of Dr. Harris Hendricks and Alex's father Andre, the police conducted several sessions with Alex, seeking to extract vital information that could shed light on the identity of his mother's killer. The sessions were emotional and traumatic, to say the least, as each day Alex demonstrated the horrific attack. But incredibly, over the course of a few days, Alex was able to provide a description of the killer. He revealed that the assailant was a Caucasian man with short hair. He was wearing a white collared and buttoned shirt with blue trousers and dark shoes. He was also carrying a black bag with him. Alex remembered how, on that fateful day, around 10:30 a.m. in the morning, when he was taking a stroll with his mother and their dog, the man suddenly appeared from nowhere. Before they could react to anything, he threw Alex to the ground and dragged him through the mud. Then he launched the fatal attack on Rachel, killing her in the process. Once the deed was done, he washed his hands in the nearby stream and quickly fled the scene. It was incredible how a 3-year-old boy could remember such intricate details even after experiencing such a devastating loss. But for the investigators, this was a promising lead, and they hoped the sketch created from Alex's description could narrow their search down. Scotland Yard, the headquarters of the Metropolitan Police Department, shared the picture with the media, appealing to the public for their assistance in providing further leads and information.
Tonight, detectives are putting all their cards on the table and they're appealing for the whole nation's help. The man was in his 20s or 30s. He was tall, more than 5 feet 10, and had short brown hair. He had a white shirt with buttons and dark trousers, possibly blue, and was carrying a small, dark bag. Curiously, his belt was over his shirt rather than round his trousers. Or perhaps it was a dog lead. He seemed to bend forward slightly as he walked. Was he trying to hide his face?
This seemed to be working, as the police soon received a startling phone call. The call came from Jane Elizabeth Harriman, who reported seeing a man acting suspiciously on Wimbledon Common at around 10:10 a.m. on the day of the tragedy. The location of this encounter was only 5 minutes away from where the murder occurred. The man was described as being in his 20s or 30s, around 5 foot 10 inches tall, with short brown hair. The description closely matched a sketch of the suspect, who was wearing a white shirt, blue trousers, and carrying a dark bag. Interestingly, he was walking with a slight bend, as if attempting to hide his face. The man reappeared a few minutes later. Mrs. Harriman was concerned because she thought that he was following a woman. Eventually, the man went in the direction where Rachel Nickell's lifeless body was later discovered. Mrs. Harriman helped police build an artist's impression of the man, which closely resembled the description provided by Rachel's son.
And he paused, and I sort of looked at him to smile, and he half smiled and turned his face away. He didn't look at me, he just turned his head away, and he seemed unsure of which way to go, and I didn't look back. Then I carried on walking past.
Another woman, Amanda Phelan, noticed a suspicious-looking man washing his hands in a drainage ditch at 10:40 a.m., just 10 minutes after the murder was believed to have taken place. When police combed through the area, they came across a footprint. However, it yielded no further clues to the murder. In fact, investigators were not even sure if the print actually belonged to the killer or not, so instead they chose to focus on the witness account. Amanda's description of the man bore a resemblance to Mrs. Harriman's artist impression sketch. Unfortunately, despite extensive efforts and a weeks-long search, no trace of the man matching the description was found. The investigation was at a standstill, but pressure was mounting on the authorities to solve the high-pressure murder case that had deeply affected the entire nation. So they took a radical approach. A month into the investigation, Scotland Yard turned to Paul Britton, a renowned criminal psychologist who was known for his work on profiling criminals, to provide his expertise. Britton, whose work inspired the television show Cracker, crafted two distinct profiles of Rachel's killer. The first profile painted a picture of a perpetrator in their 20s or 30s, taller than 5'10", likely living alone and possibly residing in close proximity to the crime scene, the Common. He would likely have been single or experienced failed relationships. The second profile delved into a more disturbing aspect, suggesting that the killer had an interest in the occult, a fascination with knives, and harbored sadistic fantasies. But the most unsettling revelation was his suggestion that the perpetrator might potentially strike again. With this new information in hand, the police launched a vast manhunt. As part of their investigation, they questioned more than 500 suspects in connection with the crime, of whom 32 were arrested but later released. Among them was Colin Stagg, a local man who found himself under scrutiny. The police believed that Colin Stagg resembled both the composite sketches created with the help of witnesses. Besides, multiple people saw him in the Common on the morning of Rachel's murder. Even the offender profile provided by Paul Britton seemed to align with him. Colin lived alone in a flat near the Wimbledon Common. At the age of 29, he was unemployed and unmarried, just like Britton had suggested. In no time, he became the prime suspect. Intrigued by this potential lead, Detective Keith Pedder decided to conduct a search of Colin's apartment. Little did he know that the search would uncover startling evidence, introducing new twists to the case. In Colin's apartment, detectives found numerous occult items, including drawings, books, and scribbles. Detectives discovered Colin following an ancient pagan religion known as Wicca, which involves the worship of nature and the practice of magic rituals.
The back bedroom had drawing of pagan deities on the walls. There was a pentagram marked out on the carpet. There was also a hooded black cowl and habit in the wardrobe. Quite clearly, we were dealing with a very unusual individual.
The discovery added another layer of complexity to the investigation. Once again, Britton's profile had been remarkably accurate. Following this discovery, Colin Stagg was arrested in connection with Rachel Nickell's murder and brought in for interrogation. Over the course of the next 3 days, Colin underwent intense questioning by the police. Investigators were desperate to discover anything that could implicate him in the murder, but it was easier said than done. So they focused their inquiries on key aspects, such as Colin's whereabouts on the day of the crime, his relationship with Rachel Nickell, and his knowledge of the events surrounding her tragic death. Colin stated that he had indeed taken his dogs for a short walk on Wimbledon Common between 8:15 and 9:15 a.m., asserting that he returned home more than an hour before Rachel was killed. While he insisted he never saw Rachel, he had another story of his own. He stated that on the Common that day, he greeted a woman pushing a stroller with her baby in it. He claimed that he observed a menacing, tall and broad man with short hair following her. Although the detectives could not find Colin's account entirely reliable, they still tried to verify his story. However, they couldn't find anyone who matched the description that Colin provided.
We checked our database of witnesses and people who said they were on the Common at the time, and we could find nobody who matched the descriptions that Colin had given us.
Yet discrepancies to his statement were not limited to this. Colin's alibi was that he was back home by 9:15 in the morning, but one of his neighbors, Susan Gale, said she saw Colin making his way to the Common between 9:25 and 9:30 wearing a white t-shirt, blue jeans, and a black bum bag. The description of his clothing had a strange similarity with the killer that Alex had described. As detectives delved deeper into Colin's life, they uncovered increasingly unsettling information. One notable discovery was a complaint made by a woman accusing Colin of exposing himself to her. This incident had occurred just a few months prior to Rachel's murder. When the police questioned Colin about the complaint, he claimed it was all a misunderstanding. According to Colin, he was sunbathing nude in a secluded area in Wimbledon Common, believing that nobody would come across him there. However, he was taken aback when the woman unexpectedly appeared. Colin emphasized that he had not intended to expose himself intentionally, and it was purely an unfortunate coincidence. This added weight to the already raised concerns about his behavior. 2 days later, Colin Stagg was taken to the Brixton Police Department for an identity parade. There, Jane Harriman, the woman who had previously helped police with a composite sketch, positively identified Colin as the suspicious man she'd seen on the morning of July 15, 1992. Despite this unnerving affirmation, detectives had no concrete evidence to tie him to the murder. And with that, he was released from custody. He did, however, plead guilty to the indecent exposure charge and was fined £200 on September 21, 1992. With the media becoming aware of Colin's story, their interest in him grew significantly. Journalists sought to capture every aspect of his behavior and actions, as well as any public reactions he displayed, which included Colin's swift departure from the court while swearing at reporters. But in a sudden twist, this media attention brought a crucial lead to the investigators. They were contacted by a call from a woman identified only as Julie, who had pertinent information to share. Julie shared that almost 2 years earlier, she placed an ad in the newspaper in the Lonely Hearts column. For those who don't know, a Lonely Hearts column is a specific space in the newspaper where people can advertise seeking a new lover or friend. Julie revealed that almost immediately after placing the ad, she got an explicit fantasy letter from Colin Stagg. However, Julie disclosed that she did not pursue any further interaction with him. This newfound lead sparked an audacious idea in the mind of the lead detective Keith Petter, an undercover operation. It was named Operation Edsel. Through this undercover operation, detectives hoped to tap into Colin Stagg's innate fantasies as a potential strategy to elicit a confession. The intention was to create a scenario that would prompt Colin to reveal his involvement or provide incriminating information regarding Rachel's murder. If he did confess, it would serve as strong evidence against him. Even if he didn't confess despite the efforts made, it would potentially help rule him out as a suspect. They decided to utilize an undercover female officer to engage with Colin, leveraging his prior behavior and tendencies. Paul Britton also stepped up to assist and design the operation. But the plan was not as simple as it sounded. Everything was at stake. If something were to go wrong, the investigators could face severe consequences, including potential damage to their careers and even the possibility of losing their jobs. On the other hand, if the operation was successful, the potential benefit would be incalculable. Capturing a possible murderer who'd been walking free could bring a sense of justice to the victim's family and calm the fears of the wider community. Despite the inherent risks, the detectives involved in the case made the decision to move forward with their plan.
One of my colleagues came up to me and said, "You realise that if it goes wrong, that's your career buggered."
We were treading on new ground. We were sailing uncharted waters. It was completely new, but we didn't know what else to do.
Meanwhile, Rachel's family was suffering in silence. The aftermath of the murder took an immense toll on her family, particularly on young Alex and his father, Andre. Alex's traumatic experience of witnessing the murder left him suffering from horrific nightmares for months. As the only parent left to raise his son, Andre initially tried to comfort and wake Alex from his distressing dreams. However, he eventually realized that his son needed time and space to heal in his own way. Alongside their personal struggles, Rachel's family had to contend with relentless media attention. The constant presence of the media invaded their privacy each and every day. But the situation worsened when a full-colored picture of Alex was published, raising concerns about his safety as the killer remained on the loose. Fearing for their well-being and seeking respite from the media circus, 7 months after Rachel's killing, Andre made the difficult decision to relocate with Alex. They first sought solace in the south of France, where the distance from the media spotlight provided some relief for Alex to cope with his emotional anguish. Later, they moved to Barcelona, Spain, in a bid to start a new life. By the start of 1993, the police had finalized their plan for Colin Stagg. In January of that year, with Keith Petter leading the way, Operation Edsel commenced. A female undercover officer, using the alias Lizzie James, initiated contact with Colin, pretending to be acquainted with Julie, the woman he'd corresponded with previously. Colin was as intrigued by the letter as he was flattered by the attention. Lizzie's expressed interest in getting to know him prompted to respond promptly with his own letters. Over a period of the next 7 months, Lizzie and Colin exchanged a total of 43 letters. Lizzie's letters were filled with explicit fantasies, but Colin's responses were more on the innocent side. As time went on, Lizzie wrote more letters, and the fantasies got stronger, but Colin did not seem to come out of his shell. All the while, Keith Petter and Paul Britton watched over the whole process and even provided their input. Despite the provocative content of Lizzie's letters, Colin did not seem to provide a single clue that could connect him to Rachel or any other woman in a criminal manner. Desperate for answers, in March of 1993, detectives decided to adopt a more forthcoming approach. Lizzie started expressing in her letters that she enjoyed being humiliated and dominated by men during intimate moments. She further conveyed her desire for Colin to feel powerful and take control over her, somewhat trying to control his murderous instinct. This time, in his response, he'd acknowledged that he could hurt her if that would please her. But additionally, he conveyed that he was not a violent man, so he'd prefer a gentler way. Although up to this point, investigators did not have any evidence to implicate him in any kind of crime, they were quite adamant that he was playing smart by not revealing his deepest desires. Otherwise, he wouldn't have entertained Lizzie this far. In May of 1993, Colin Stagg expressed his desire to meet Lizzie, the undercover officer, in person. The detectives recognized this as a potential opportunity to gather more information and induce truth from Colin. They agreed to arrange a meeting. A public park was chosen as the location for the meeting, ensuring the presence of undercover officers to closely monitor the interaction. Lizzie James was well aware of the psychological battle she'd have to engage in with Colin Stagg, as she'd been briefed by Paul Britton.
She had been given a very, very detailed briefing by Paul Britton as to what to expect, how to behave. Not only had she got to play her part, she also had to stay as far as possible within the realms of what is accepted legally. The task facing her was one that would frighten the living daylights out of most people.
But the question remained, would she be successful in uncovering Colin's dark secrets? On the scheduled day, Colin Stagg arrived at the park early. Detectives were concerned that Stagg might detect something amiss and abandon the meeting. However, to their relief, Colin decided to wait for Lizzie to arrive. After a brief introduction, Colin and Lizzie went to a restaurant, with undercover officers discreetly following their trail. In an effort to provoke a reaction and potentially elicit revealing information from Colin Stagg, Lizzie shared a lurid story during their lunch together. She played her role as bait and disclosed personal details about herself, including a fabricated account of being involved in black magic and satanic rituals with a former boyfriend. She went on to claim that they'd participated in a disturbing human sacrifice involving a pregnant woman and a baby. Even then, Colin stayed guarded about his experiences. At the end of their lunch date, Colin handed Lizzie a letter, and the two went their separate ways with the promise of meeting again. Colin Stagg's lack of disclosure frustrated the detectives. They were on the verge of losing hope when an unexpected twist emerged from the darkness. The newest letter to Lizzie introduced a disturbing element to the story. In the letter, he talked about his disturbing fantasies, along with his desires for knives and blood. This was further proof to the investigators that they were on to the right man.
The contents included a sexual fantasy on Wimbledon Common, which involved the use of a knife, the cutting of flesh, and the flowing of blood. And this was the first time that there had been any indication, any mention of knives or blood, or the use of any of those items for sexual gratification.
In later correspondence, Lizzie continued to push his boundaries, saying that her preference was someone who was violent, referring to the Rachel Nickel case. Colin admitted to being on the common in the morning, but went no further than that. In the final attempts to obtain a confession, Lizzie persisted that she wished that Colin was responsible for the Wimbledon Common murder. However, Colin admitted that police had questioned him about Rachel's murder but maintained his innocence. The conversation was secretly taped.
To tell you the truth, they think I did it even now. I got pulled over by the police bank holiday Monday, May 31st.
I wish you had done it, and knowing you got away with it. That's brilliant. I wish you had.
However, detectives were yet to find any conclusive proof to implicate Colin Stagg in the murder of Rachel Nickel. Almost a year after Rachel's death, Colin Stagg gave an interview to Daily Start, insisting that he had nothing to do with her murder. Detectives realized that the chances of Colin admitting to Rachel's murder were very slim, now more so than ever when he publicly released a statement denying any involvement. The undercover operation was aborted. With Operation Edsel no longer in play, the investigators would refocus their efforts on the existing evidence. They believed that they'd accumulated sufficient evidence to obtain a conviction against Colin Stagg in relation to the murder of Rachel Nickell. The key elements included Mrs. Harriman's identification of Colin, his presence at Wimbledon on the day of the crime, and his explicit fantasy letters to Lizzie James. On August 17, 1993, Colin Stagg was arrested for the second time in connection to Rachel Nickell's murder. This time, he chose to practice his right to remain silent.
That on the 15th of July, 1992, at Wimbledon Common, you murdered Rachel Nickell, causing her death by multiple stab wounds.
As a last resort, psychologists Paul Britton and Scotland Yard detectives decided to employ a strategy where Lizzie James would enter the interview room unannounced in an attempt to prompt Colin Stagg to talk. When Colin learned that he'd been set up, he appeared upset and remained tight-lipped in his words.
Yes, I'm a serving police officer. For the purposes of this interview, I'm known as Lizzie James.
More than a year after Rachel Nickell's horrific murder, Colin Stagg was officially charged with the crime. He'd spend the next 13 months in custody, all the while protesting his innocence. Despite a lack of forensic evidence, investigators thought that the case against Colin was strong and that winning a conviction was possible. The Crown Prosecution Service also felt that there were sustainable grounds to proceed. Colin's trial was set for February of 1994 in Old Bailey, the Central Criminal Court of England and Wales. But before the jury could be sworn in, the defense requested before the judge that the undercover operation be ruled as inadmissible evidence. They argued that the operation had no direct connection to the actual case and raised concerns about its legality and ethical implications. In contrast, the prosecution contended that the undercover operation was instrumental in delving into the accused's innermost fantasies, which they believed likely played a role as a motive in the crime. The legal battle delayed the trial for a few months until it finally began in September 1994. In a stunning twist, after several days of deliberation, Mr. Justice Ognall rejected the evidence presented by the prosecution, branding it as a honey trap. He heavily criticized the Metropolitan Police's handling of the case, particularly Operation Edsel. He even expressed concerns about the methods employed, stating that they went beyond what was legally acceptable. Therefore, due to a lack of evidence, Colin Stagg was acquitted. It was a significant setback for the Metropolitan Police and the prosecution. The investigation into the murder of Rachel Nickell spanned over 2 years and involved a substantial number of resources, including a collection of 4,500 statements and significant man-hours dedicated to the case. The cost incurred during the investigation was reported to be over £3 million. It was the largest murder investigation in British history, which collapsed on the very first day of the trial. The acquittal of their prime suspect infuriated Scotland Yard. But it was nothing compared to the vehement reaction of the press and the public. Though Colin Stagg gained his freedom, outside of the courtroom, another trial awaited him. This trial by the media fueled the stigma about people's perception of him, which would continue to ruin his life for years to come. Every so often, his name appeared in the newspapers as the man who possibly got away with murder. His home was frequently vandalized, and people painted it with vulgar graffiti labeling him as a killer. London police maintained their belief in Colin Stagg's guilt even after the trial.
Colin Stagg has been through a version of justice, albeit truncated, and he has been found not guilty. But I wonder whether he can actually say hand on heart that he believes people, when they meet him in the street, believe that. But I do not believe the system served anybody that particular day.
Metropolitan Chief Commissioner of Police Paul Condon announced that they felt the outcome of the trial was influenced by skilled lawyers who were able to secure Colin Stagg's acquittal. Thus, they'd not be looking for anyone else. The outcome was heartbreaking for Rachel's family.
The law has been upheld, but where is the justice? I understand that the police will now keep the files on my daughter's murder open, but they are not looking for anyone else.
Following this tiring ordeal, Scotland Yard, too, faced significant criticism. The criminal psychologist Paul Britton took the most heat. Although he later tried to claim that he had no knowledge about the fantasy letters, that fact had been disputed by many. The British Psychological Society even charged Britton with professional misconduct. However, due to delays in the case, it was eventually dismissed. Keith Pedler was not left behind either. His career was finished, and he took early retirement from the police force. Lizzie James also followed the same path. After claiming to experience stress and mental breakdown due to the investigation, she too took early retirement from the police force and sued for damages. The case was settled out of court in 2001, resulting in a payment of £125,000 to Lizzie James. The payout also drew significant criticism, particularly because Rachel's son Alex had been granted £22,000 compensation, which was less than a fifth of the amount paid to the undercover detective. With a lack of leads to follow, Rachel Nickell's case went cold after this. Each year, however, on the anniversary of Rachel's death, there was mounting pressure on Scotland Yard to bring justice to the deceased mother. In 2002, 10 years after the murder of Rachel Nickell, Scotland Yard initiated a cold case review team to re-examine the case. The team consisted of a small group of officers and retired investigators who analyzed witness statements, reviewed files on potential suspects, and explored the possibility of connections between the case and other crimes. But they had another weapon up their sleeve, too. Over these 10 years, DNA testing had vastly improved, enabling investigators to obtain more reliable and conclusive results. It played a pivotal role in bringing perpetrators to justice. So naturally, the cold case review team also turned to advanced DNA technologies. For the next 18 months, forensic experts extensively examined and tested Rachel Nickell's clothing. Finally, in July 2003, a significant development occurred. Police discovered male DNA. Although the DNA sample was not sufficient to confirm the identity of the individual, it played a crucial role in eliminating any previous suspects who'd been under investigation. The sample did not match the DNA of Andre, Alex, or any of the investigators, indicating that it had most likely come from the killer. In a turn of events that defied all expectations and shattered long-held beliefs, the unforeseen twist in the investigation came with the revelation that the DNA evidence had also ruled out Colin Stagg as a suspect. After having been the center of intense scrutiny and suspicion, Colin suddenly found himself exonerated by scientific evidence. But this revelation meant that the investigation was thrust back to square one. However, it also widened the path for a fair investigation for the first time in years. It would be another year before the potential breakthrough in unraveling Rachel Nickell's killer emerged. In July of 2004, 12 years after Rachel Nickell's death, the DNA evidence finally linked the murder to a 38-year-old man, Robert Napper. Born on February 25, 1966, in Erith, southeast London, Robert Napper was the eldest child of his parents, Brian and Pauline Napper. He, alongside his two brothers and one sister, endured a dysfunctional childhood due to the deeply troubled relationship between his parents. His father, a bus conductor by profession, regularly abused his mother, Pauline, leading to their divorce when Napper was just 9 years old. After they divorced, the children all went into foster care and underwent psychiatric treatment for 6 years at the Maudsley Hospital in Camberwell. During his stay there, Napper was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome and paranoid schizophrenia.
He seemed to be very frustrated with people and get into a lot of trouble. A child with Asperger's can have a very difficult time making friends and keeping friends and really knowing what's socially appropriate.
These diagnoses likely contributed to his awkwardness at school. But his personality drastically changed when he was 12 or 13 after a family member assaulted him during a camping trip. As a result, he became incredibly shy and reclusive. But that didn't stop him from bullying his younger siblings and spying on his younger sister when she undressed. At 16, Napper left school and pursued a catering course along with a slew of menial jobs. His behavior became increasingly erratic with age. So much so that his mother threw him out of her house when he became 18 because she could no longer put up with him. Napper's criminal activities began in 1986 at the age of 20. He was arrested for carrying a loaded air gun and shooting small animals in the local woods. He was given a 1-year conditional discharge. But from there, his crimes became far more serious, while his intentions became vile. In August of 1989, he assaulted a 31-year-old woman at knife point in her Plumstead Common home. In November, Napper's mother, Pauline, called the police and told them that her son had confessed to an assault. Unfortunately, the police didn't seem to take much interest in the call, as Napper wasn't linked to any attack and wasn't even questioned. At this point, Pauline had no other option but to break off all connection with her eldest son. From 1989 to 1992, Napper attacked numerous women and assaulted some of them. But he always stayed one step ahead of the law, or should we say, the authorities never bothered to look deeper. Even in August of 1992, when the police had twice been tipped off about him by neighbors. They asked him to give a blood sample both times, and both times he failed to turn up. Yet he was eliminated as a suspect due to a height discrepancy between the assailant and Robert Napper. In October of 1992, Robert Napper was arrested for stalking a civilian employee at the Plumstead police station, leading to a search of his apartment. During their search, they found a red toolbox which contained a .22 caliber pistol, 2 knives, a crossbow, and a cache of ammunition, along with several maps containing markings, notes on binding and restraining people, a diary filled with suspicious entries, and a fitness card belonging to a blonde woman. Even with a mountain of evidence, Robert Napper was only charged with firearm violations. What's worse, despite a psychiatric report clearly describing him as, without a doubt, an immediate threat to himself and the public, he was merely given an 8-week custodial sentence, and no further inquiries regarding the search were pursued. On November 3, 1993, a horrifying incident occurred at the Bissett home in Plumstead. Robert Napper stabbed 27-year-old Samantha Bissett in her neck and chest, resulting in her death. He then proceeded to smother her 4-year-old daughter, Jasmine Jemima Bissett. Napper maimed Samantha's body and kept some body parts as trophies. The crime scene was so gruesome that the assigned police photographer had to take a 2-year leave of absence due to the traumatic experience. Following the recovery of a fingerprint belonging to Napper from Samantha's flat, he was arrested and charged with the murders of Samantha and Jasmine Bissett in May 1994. In October of 1995, Napper pleaded guilty to manslaughter on grounds of diminished responsibility due to his mental illness and was sentenced to indefinite detention at the Broadmoor Psychiatric Hospital in London, where he was being held at the time. The circumstances of Samantha and Rachel's murders were eerily similar. So in December 1995, Napper was questioned about the death of Rachel Nickel, but he denied any involvement in that case. It's disturbing to think that had the police done their job with full competency, Samantha and Jasmine would have still been alive. Napper was also strongly believed to be responsible for the majority, if not all, of the attacks attributed to the Green Chain Rapist. This notorious assailant gained the nickname from the Green Chain Walk, a series of interconnected pathways spanning various parts of southeast London. Over a span of 4 years, ending in 1994, this individual committed at least 70 assaults across the region. 4 of the earliest of the Green Chain assaults have been connected to Napper, particularly based on his own admissions in 1995. The evidence strongly implicated him as the perpetrator of these heinous crimes. And then there was Rachel Nickel's killing in the middle of everything. It's hard to fathom how Paul Britton, the criminal profiler and psychologist who is also working on the Green Chain assaults case and the double murder case of Samantha and Jasmine Bissett, along with Rachel Nickel's murder case, could have missed the similarities between the 3 crimes. During further investigation, additional links connecting Robert Napper to the crimes were discovered. Napper's shoes turned out to match the shoe print discovered near the stream on Wimbledon Common at the time of Rachel's killing, where a man had been observed washing blood from his hands. Moreover, the small flecks of red paint that were found in Alex's hair were also determined to be a match for the red paint found on a toolbox discovered in Napper's apartment. Furthermore, in August 1993, a knife was discovered buried in a box on Wimbledon Common, located only 800 yards away from where Rachel Nickel was attacked. Fingerprints from this knife were later matched to Robert Napper.
No 2 fingerprints can ever be identical, but there were very, very many similarities, and written those fingerprints off as Samantha's. Luckily for us, the fingerprints were on record, and they came back to Robert Napper.
However, at the time of this discovery, the detectives working on Rachel's murder case had already formed the belief that Colin Stagg was the perpetrator, and the information linking Napper to the knife was disregarded. These pieces of evidence played a crucial role in establishing a connection between Napper and Rachel's murder, providing further support for his involvement in these horrific incidents. In July 2006, a team from Scotland Yard visited Broadmoor, Berkshire, to interview one of its inmates, Robert Napper, regarding Rachel Nickell's murder. At that time, 40-year-old Napper was housed in the Psychiatric Institute, having been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and Asperger's syndrome. However, Napper did not provide any assistance. On November 28, 2007, Robert Napper was officially charged with the murder of Rachel Nickell. He pleaded not guilty to Rachel Nickell's murder, and the trial commenced on November 11, 2008. During the proceedings on December 18, 2008, at the Old Bailey, Napper changed his plea to guilty for the manslaughter of Rachel Nickell on the grounds of diminished responsibility.
Mr. Napper has been found guilty of Rachel's murder. That means in total he has murdered 2 women, 1 child, at least 1 woman, and attempted to rape 2 others. We sincerely hope, whatever the court says, that he will spend the rest of his life in a totally secure environment to protect all other people.
Judge Griffith Williams, presiding over the case, declared Napper to be a very dangerous man and ordered his indefinite detention at Broadmoor Psychiatric Hospital. Given the seriousness of Robert Napper's crimes and the indefinite detention order imposed by the court, it's highly unlikely that he'll ever be released into society again. Finally, after 16 years, and many twists and turns later, justice for Rachel Nickell was finally served. In 2008, London police were forced to make a public apology to Colin Stagg.
I need to and must set the record straight with regard to Colin Stagg. In August 1993, he was wrongly accused of Rachel's murder. It is clear that he is completely innocent of any involvement in that case. And I today apologise to him for the mistakes that were made in the early 1990s.
Additionally, he was awarded £706,000 in compensation as a result of the mishandling of the police investigation and the wrongful accusation into the murder of Rachel Nickell. Colin Stagg has expressed that he does not hold any grudge against the police. However, he has expressed animosity towards Paul Britton. Colin believes that Britton's criminal profiling had a detrimental impact on his life, leading to false assumptions and biases against him. Rachel Nickell's son, Alex, still lives in Barcelona with his father. At 27, he's a yoga teacher by profession. Despite enduring the unimaginable tragedy, Alex has managed to grow into a sensible individual. He's written a book about this tragedy, naming it Letting Go, a true story of murder, loss, and survival. Reflecting a profound level of forgiveness and emotional maturity on his part, Alex says he holds no animosity towards the man who turned his life upside down.
Well, you know, everyone's going to make mistakes. We're all human. You know, in this story, it's not about whether the police made mistakes or didn't make mistakes. You know, it's about the institution becoming bigger than the individual it's designed to protect. So when you have a system of dark corridors like we have in the police, it attracts people who are more prone to incompetence and more prone to corruption. And that's what happened in our story, you know.
It's also remarkable how his father, Andre, at 55 years old, can express forgiveness towards Robert Napper and even demonstrate a degree of sympathy for him. Forgiveness for us is that if you don't forgive the person who caused you harm, then you become that person in time, he stated. Despite the forgiveness extended by the victim's family, it's undeniable that had law enforcement done its job effectively in this case, a multitude of victims could have been spared from unimaginable suffering. The failures and mishandling of the investigation allowed the perpetrator to continue his reign of terror, inflicting harm upon innocent individuals. This story serves as a stark reminder of the crucial role law enforcement plays in protecting and serving the community, and the devastating consequences that can arise when their duty is not fulfilled with utmost diligence. As we bring our exploration of the Rachel Nickell case to a close, one question remains. Could Robert Napper have been stopped sooner? Or do you think he would have evaded the law anyway? Let us know your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. If there's a case you'd like us to cover, Don't hesitate to drop your recommendations in the comment section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating true crime stories. Until next time, stay safe and keep your eyes peeled for the next mystery to unfold.